Welcome, everyone, to a brand new week of the Media Row podcast. I'm your host, Justin Miller. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. We have a fun and busy show planned for you. It is going to be a lot of Drake men's basketball talk as they get a huge home victory to kick off 2026. Yes, you heard that correctly. A home victory for the Drake Bulldogs. We'll talk about the importance of that. You'll hear from Coach Henderson in our post-game interview clips. You also hear from Coach Pohlman in her post-game interview clip as well, because we will discuss the Drake women's basketball team and their continued success in conference play and just how Pohlman has greatly changed the perspective of this Drake team in the last 3 games and what she's been doing right and what's the team doing right in the Valley play. So we'll get to that. And then finish up today's show with some NFL talk, because the most asked question I had this weekend, both in person at the Knapp Center and on Twitter, was, what is your confidence level in the Seattle Seahawks? Will they make it to the Super Bowl? Are they going to win the Super Bowl? So I'll discuss that. I'll discuss the Seahawks and my confidence and just my perspective of that huge win against San Francisco to finish up today's show. But before we get to any of that, make sure, if you haven't yet, to like, subscribe, comment, rate wherever you are getting this show, and then follow us all over social media. At Media Row Pod is where you can catch us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, be sure to go out and support Kelly's Little Nipper, a proud sponsor of the show at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Love Kelly's Little Nipper. Great food, great drinks, but the community there, that is what makes Kelly's Little Nipper so special. Jeff and his workers and the people that come in there are amazing. And that is why when they agreed to sponsor the show, I got hyped, because I just knew what it meant to be partnered up with Jeff and the wonderful people at Kelly's Little Nipper. So go check out everything and more that Kelly's Little Nipper has to offer at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. So let's open up today's show talking about the huge Drake men's basketball victory as they take down Indiana State 74-72 at home. At home is huge to start off with, because this is the first Division I team Drake has beat in the Knapp Center this season. They are now 4-5 at home, so closing in on that losing record. Drake hasn't had a losing record at home since like 2016, so it's been a while since fans have gone to the Knapp Center and kind of been worried about what the outcome would be. So here's Coach Henderson talking about those emotions and why it was so important to get this win in front of the home crowd.
I don't know if it's relief or what, but it feels really good. You know, I mean, our fans are incredible. I mean, it's, you know, I know our first game was packed, and honestly, it stayed that pretty much the same. They stick with us. I think they appreciate our effort. They appreciate our ability to want to get better every time we step on the floor, and so to be able to come out on this end of it felt pretty good, and not only for our players but for our supporters as well. But be honest with you, you know, we've been in this situation before, and I was just really happy with. There's moments in this game where we could have folded, and we have in moments like this earlier in the year, and so to be able to be in those moments again and really execute, especially down the stretch defensively. We got stops on the last 5 possessions. I'm just really proud of how our guys were able to hang in there and have continued to grow in that area.
And that is why I keep saying huge game, huge victory for this Drake team. And it's not a huge victory in the sense of this has cemented Drake as a title contender. It cemented them into the NCAA tournament. I hope you guys know that that is not the perspective I'm pushing. What I'm trying to say here is this was a must-win game for the Drake Bulldogs, and they answered the call. This was a must-win because you had some fans on the brink, and the confidence level was low. The discussions around Drake were dark. So this was a must-win game for the Drake Bulldogs from a morale perspective for the fans, the staff, the players, the coaches. And Drake answered the call. And they did so in a fashion in which they have lost a lot of their early games this season. This year, Drake has gone into games in the first 10 to 15 minutes. They come out with high energy and physicality, but then they get popped in the mouth once. Look at the Illinois State game, for example, and they kind of panic and they fail to make adjustments and they fold under pressure. That didn't happen on Sunday. So not only did this Drake team showcase to fans that they're making improvement and these wins are going to start following, but they showed that they can win in the style in which they've lost games in. Because the biggest difference was that they didn't fold under that pressure. When Indiana State popped them in the mouth, Drake responded with a punch of their own. They made adjustments without losing intensity, and they had an offense that was balanced, but most importantly, under control. 5 players with double figures. Jalen Quinn being able to drive first and kick out second. And it's all because of Henderson's game plan and the players buying into it and executing that game plan of moving without the ball. We had seen time and time again, when you have attacking first guards like Thomas and Quinn, they'll drive to the paint, that defense collapses, and at times our offense looked very complacent and stagnant and would stand in one spot where Quinn and Thomas would have no choice but to try to force a shot. That didn't happen against Indiana State. Thomas and Quinn, they drove to the paint. The defense collapsed with the great movement we were seeing off ball from the Drake Bulldogs. They didn't have to panic. They didn't have to force a shot. They were able to take what the defense gave them because they had options to kick out. There was a beautiful play, which I wish I would have wrote it down when exactly it happened. We had Quinn drive baseline, kicks it out to, I believe it was Goodberry in the corner. He passes it back to Andrew Aaliyah, nails a right wing 3. And they had the defense moving. They had the ball moving. They had players moving. There was great movement. There was that balance, but there was also just that sense of being in control that I think we've missed in a lot of these early regular season games from this Drake offense. They were able to make those adjustments without losing their intensity. They responded to the Indiana State punches with their own. So now the test for Henderson's squad, easier said than done, is to build on this momentum and put together a string of some really solid wins. And that is going to be put to the test on Wednesday at Bradley, as that is definitely not an easy place to come out with a victory in. So should be a lot of fun. We'll be covering that game at 8 o'clock. We'll be previewing that game earlier in the day on Wednesday's edition of the show. But before we move on, of course, to the Drake women, more things I want to talk about with this Drake men's basketball victory against Indiana State. And that's just more on this offense. I thought the offense was really fun to watch on Sunday. That ball movement I've been talking about was really impressive. And what they did so well was with moving that ball around, they were able to catch those shooters in position. They didn't have to create as much. Those shooters in Thomas, Shetlar, and Quinn, they would pass it, and you could tell like it was picture perfect, where Jashawn Thomas was bent down and getting ready to pop it. They did a wonderful job of finding their shooters in position. The defense also was greatly improved upon on Sunday. That defense responded to those runs Indiana State had. They didn't falter under pressure. And I thought it was proven by the way they finished the game. You know, we worry about this team coming in and losing that early intensity they start every game with. That didn't happen, where they ended the game stronger than they started the game. Indiana State lost this game because they couldn't put the ball in the basket for the final 5 minutes. Drake held them without a made field goal in the final 5 minutes. So kudos to the defense. Kudos to Henderson and his staff. This was a game, morale-wise, fans really needed. Maybe more than others want to admit. But this was a game that I think you get that victory and you start the building blocks to really put together a win streak. So here are some of my concerns I have following this win. And first and foremost, it's that perimeter defense. I thought the defense made some really good adjustments in that second half. They held Indiana State to shoot 37% from the field, only convert 3 3-pointers in that entire second half. They win the game because Indiana State can't make a field goal in the final 5 minutes. But that first half, Indiana State could really get off any shot they wanted, especially around the arc. It was very reminiscent of the loss to Illinois State, where Illinois State exposed a lot of issues with that perimeter defense. We're still seeing communication errors. You're seeing guys lose track of the opposing players, where there's guys wide open on the 3-point line. There's a lot to be concerned about with that perimeter defense. Now, if we see this Drake team come out and guard the 3 a lot better in that first half against Bradley, I think that calms us down a little because of how Drake ended today's game against Indiana State, of how they ended Sunday, where they were able to really put some pressure on Indiana State and make them uncomfortable. The other concern I have is those free throws. Drake, each guy goes up there and shoots 50% at the line. They shot 4 of 9 on the day. Jashawn Thomas, 2 of 4 down the stretch, where he makes 2 and you force Indiana State to take a 3. Instead, Drake leaves Camp Wagner open, and we're fortunate enough that he misses that shot. But this could have been a very dark topic going into today. Luckily, Drake is able to pull off the victory. So you see that 4 of 9, and you can just put it to the side of like, all right, that won't be consistent. It is starting to be consistent. Jalen Quinn went 0 for 2 on technical free throws against Illinois State. That is something to start sweating about, because you were able to escape today with a victory, despite shooting poorly at the charity stripe. Against Belmont, Murray State, Bradley, UNI, you cannot expect to shoot 44% at the free throw line and pull out victories. One, in the style in which Drake plays, just need to capitalize on those opportunities. When you have guys that drive into the paint, where you have in the back of your mind, you're kind of going in expecting to be fouled, then convert on those opportunities. Take advantage of those opportunities. So those are my 2 biggest concerns. That perimeter defense, number 1, free throw second. There were still a lot of improvements made upon from the first half to the second half, but now it's just putting together those building blocks. I thought Drake came out and played their best 40 minutes in front of the home crowd they have all year long. This was a huge morale boosting victory for the Drake Bulldogs. But now it just gets tougher. Drake is without Exact after he appeared on the court with a brace on his foot. It appears to be a broken foot. Heard from a couple of people that could be out for the season. But Coach Henderson said at the press conference that while it doesn't look good, they expect to learn more kind of on Wednesday, middle of this week. So fingers crossed, hopefully you get him back, for St. Louis. But definitely a huge loss with a guy that just brings such a big body in the paint and is the best rebounder for the Drake Bulldogs by far. So now you got to look towards those bigs in Carr, Federico, Goodberry to really buckle up and advance their style of play when it comes to crashing the glass. They're going to be looked upon huge in that factor. Also, it doesn't hurt, though, when you have some guards like Andrew Aaliyah. Man, joked with Coach Henderson after the game of asking him, what is he putting in that dude's protein shake? And he joked back saying he knows how to get playing time. And that's because he goes out there and in his 6'3" body, he's not that big of a guy, 9 rebounds, 4 offensive boards. I mean, that guy has some fire and grit to him when it comes to crashing the boards. Maybe it's something about Drake, but man, we sure love finding those undersized guys that can crash boards. Garrett Sturtz, ring a bell for anyone? Not saying Aaliyah is on Garrett Sturtz's level, because Sturtz, of course, is the school's all-time reboundings leader, but he shows flashes of that intensity when it comes to crashing the glass. So Drake wins 74-72. There was a lot of good, some concerns moving forward, but overall, this was the conversation I was wanting to have today of a morale booster, and now the plan is to just build upon it and get that started with a huge opportunity against Bradley. Teams that have been taking advantage of their opportunities is the Drake women's team. They continue their conference dominance. They win now 3 straight Valley games, each by 12 plus, after Friday night's 89-75 victory over SIU. And what we'll start with first is just what that means for the Drake program. Drake women's basketball records their 1,000th all-time victory. So kudos to Brian Harden, Allison Pohlman, the players, the coaching staff, everyone involved, because that's incredible. And they become the 37th all-time Division I program to reach that milestone. And what's even more impressive is Pohlman's role, as she has been a part of 379 of those 1,000 victories, because she's been a part of it as a assistant head coach, and as a head coach. So really impressive, and kudos to Pohlman, what she's been able to do for this Drake program. But back to just what this game means for this season. This team has completely flipped the script from the non-con. And I brought it up 1,000 times of forget about what's happened in the non-con. Focus on what's happening now. This team and what Pohlman's been able to do in 3 games has been really impressive. And it's completely changed the perspective. That's why we're talking about Henderson and how important it is to get that win against Indiana State. If you're able to rattle off 1, 2 more wins in a row, you can change the perspective of your fan base real fast. Because when Drake lost to Lindenwood, I had fans of the women's team coming up to me saying like, what's going on? And I said, I know it's dark and I know it sucks losing these games. But look at what Pohlman's been able to do in those adjustments made from the halftime locker room to the third quarter. That Iowa State game's a perfect example. Drake came out the better team at halftime against Iowa State. It was just Iowa State had better athletes, more diverse athletes in size and skill, where they just were able to withstand a 15-point push by the Drake Bulldogs. But I saw in that small glimpse what I would expect in the Valley, because I saw Pohlman's record and resume of the 379 wins of 1,000. And if I'm seeing her make these adjustments in 15 minutes and they come out and look so strong, then what's going to happen in a month? And that's exactly what Pohlman's done. And so I asked her on Friday night after the game, just what has changed from the non-con to Valley play? And here's Coach Pohlman's answer.
As we started conference play, I think what we did a really great job of was hitting the reset button, and kind of starting at like a clean slate. We said, conference season, we're 0-0. let's go ahead, let's figure out a way to, develop what our brand is, figure out a way what Drake women's basketball looks like. How does this team attack those things? And ever since then, what I've seen is a very hungry, very dedicated group who's become much more resilient through practicing and their work that they're putting in to be able to then step on the floor with uniforms on and the lights on and to find some success.
So that game, it really was a role reversal, is how I explained it to most people in that first half. You had SIU leading Drake 40-39, and it was weird. The Salukis were more physical defensively. They won the turnover battle, forced like 9 Drake turnovers. They shot the ball extremely well, shot 49% from the field, shot it well in transition too, which was weird. And that's all on top of the Salukis coming into this game being the 10th offense in the Valley, last in field goal percentage, 10th in three-point percentage, and 10th in turnovers. But what did I tell Drake fans? What did we start seeing at the end of the second quarter that we would see change the game around in the second half? Pohlman's adjustments. They go out there, and first it started late in the second quarter, starting with star guard Abby Alsma, who would go on to finish with 29 points, one away from tying a career high in 30, which she had the last time out on the floor against UIC. But it starts with Alsma, and I don't know if Pohlman told her to just go on attack mode or if Alsma just saw her opening. Talked to Abby about it a little bit, and she just kind of said, her teammates put her in good position. But from my perspective, I saw Abby Alsma create her own shot, the best we've seen all year long. That's kind of been my one thing I've said about Abby Alsma is she really needs the role players and the depth to garner some attention off of her because she's at her best as a spot-up shooter. She kind of proved me wrong on Friday night because in that second quarter when things were looking bleak for Drake, she took over and was creating her own shots, attacking the paint, going right at the defenders, and was incredible. Then in that third quarter and especially in the fourth quarter, then you started seeing that chemistry from the entire team. And why the bench played such a vital role and the depth of this team is so vital moving forward because the bench put up 24 points. But this team overall, the chemistry of Pohlman's team is what is so impressive and what has led them to these 3 straight victories by 12-plus points over Valley teams. 24 assists against SIU. That's their 3rd straight Valley game with 20-plus assists. This team is connecting on all levels, and it's beautiful basketball to watch. If you have not made it to a Drake women's game yet, you need to. This team is really fun to watch, and the fundamentals from Pohlman and her staff are amazing, are outstanding. So I asked Pohlman about if this is kind of a message to the rest of the Valley, and she kind of brushed it off, said no, and it's more of a message to the team themselves. I think it's a message to the Valley. Now, the counter argument is they haven't really played anyone in the Valley. UIC, Indiana State, SIU aren't great teams. I guess we'll find out because I think this Drake team has put out a message that they are going to be Valley contenders. And if you don't believe that because of the 3 teams they've played so far, I guess we'll find out on Friday. 6:30, Drake takes on Belmont. Belmont will be their first true test in the Valley. And they'll test them offensively, but especially the Belmont defense is great. That they can really put some pressure on the guard play of Drake. And we all know the stars on Drake begin with Alsma and Knutson at that guard position. So that will be the test. And it will be kind of the measuring point for where this Drake team truly is. Because we saw the issues in the non-con. Again, throw those out of the way. Now we're seeing success in the Valley, but they're against SIU, Indiana State, and UIC. So Friday will be a really exciting game and will be a measuring stick for the season moving forward for the Drake women as they take on Belmont. 6:30 tip-off at the Knapp Center. A great game if you haven't been to a women's game yet this season. So try to get out there. We'll be there, of course, covering the game. So catch our updates and interviews on Twitter at Media Row Pod. So before we finish up today's show, I said I would answer the question that I was asked the most about. And that is my confidence level in my favorite NFL team in the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks, they win the NFC West. They earn the 1 seed, get that bye with a 13-3 victory over San Francisco. First and foremost, I am hyped that the NFC has to go through the 12th man. We have been without home field advantage. And even at home games, you've seen Seattle struggle to hold Lumen Field as their own. We brought it up last year with the Packers game and the Bills game. You bring in a playoff atmosphere in Seattle, things are going to change. But the biggest thing with this team, that defense is legit. That defense is legit. You had the Legion of Boom. This defense is the Swarm, in my opinion. That's why I'm going to call this defense for now on, is the Swarm. Because that ball gets passed or handed off, there's 5 Seahawks swarming in for the tackle. And that's a credit to Mike McDonald's system and the chemistry he's building upon this roster where they're all connected on the same page. Look at the numbers San Francisco put up against Seattle on Saturday. They're abysmal. 2 of 9 on third down, only 9 total first downs, 173 yards total. That's how good the Seahawks defense is. And then on the offensive side, despite the struggles of getting into the end zone and the missed opportunities with the missed field goals, this offense still impressed me. And it starts with how balanced they were. Over 180 yards in both the air and the rushing game. And it was truly the run game and those huge third down conversions that led Seattle to this victory. 4.6 yards per carry. They just tired out and physically dominated that 49ers defense. Then those third downs, 3 of 4 on 3rd and 7 or longer. That's how you win a game on the road. And so when it comes to confidence level, my confidence is pretty high in the Seahawks team. And that is because there is something that separates this Seahawks team from the last 5 years. And it's not the 4,000 yards in the air from Sam Darnold. It's not the running back duo of Charbonnet and Walker. It's not even the historic season from JSN. It was that last drive. That is what gave me the confidence moving forward. When Seattle needed to chew time off of the clock, and they did so efficiently. 16 plays, 89 yards, over 8 minutes taken off the clock. That drive right there said to me, this team is different. Because the past 5 years, a Seahawks team can't put together that kind of drive. So my confidence is high. Now, there's a lot that has to go Seattle's way, and there's still plenty left to be improved upon. But this team truly means business. And it doesn't hurt that they have the number 1 seed in the NFC. That's for sure. That was a fun game. Stressful game. I put out a bunch of tweets talking about, like, I woke up Saturday a nervous wreck. But the playoffs are going to be fun. They really are. I mean, when you have Carolina in it, you have the Packers as the 7th seed, the Eagles as a 3 seed in the NFC. I mean, that's the reigning Super Bowl champs who are just confusing to scout, in my opinion. I think that this is one of the more balanced and really confusing NFL playoffs we've had in a long time, where I don't know who's going to win it. There's not a clear-cut favorite from each side. Hell, you have the Rams sitting there as a 5th or 6th seed, and I think they could easily win the Super Bowl as well. So I think it's going to be a really fun race to the Super Bowl on both sides, especially that NFC, though, in my opinion. We're going to talk more about the NFL coming up on Wednesday's show. Wednesday's show, we'll start the show off by previewing the Drake Bradley game and giving our Missouri Valley Conference standings updates like we've been doing during this season. But we're also going to have an interview with Ray Roberts, who was a former Seattle Seahawks draft pick and someone who knows the NFL game inside and out. And so he's going to not only talk about the Seahawks, but talk about the NFL playoffs as a whole. So a really fun and big show coming up Wednesday here on the Media Row podcast. That will do it, though, for our Monday show. Happy to have everyone here. It's exciting to kick off our 2026 season with a Drake victory on both sides. We get to talk about what I think will be one of the most exciting NFL playoffs in a long time. And then we didn't even get to the Indiana conversation and the college football playoffs. There's just so much right now happening. So you don't want to miss it as you can tune in Wednesday and Friday to finish up this week of the Media Row podcast.